More variety.
We ain't running a timer here. We're mass communicating.
You're listening to Para X.
As I was walking all alone, I heard two ravens cry and moan. One to the other did say, oh, where shall we go and dine today? Oh, where shall we go and dine today? Out behind that old high dike, I know there lies a murdered knight. No one knows that he lies there, oh, but his hawk and his hound and his lady fair, oh, his hawk and his hound and his lady fair. To the hunting gone, his hound to bring the wild fowl home. His lady loves another night, oh, so we may make our meal tonight, oh, we may make our meal tonight. Sit on his milk-white thigh, and I'll peck out his bonny blue eye. With a lock of his golden hair, oh, we'll fix our nest when it grows bare, oh, we'll fix our nest when it grows bare. Shall know where he has gone, or his bones where they lie bare, oh, the wind shall blow forevermore, oh, the wind shall blow forevermore.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Merry meet everybody. Happy Thanksgiving and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the Para X Radio Network. Thanksgiving Day was originally founded as a religious observance for all the members of the community to give thanks to God for a common purpose, and it's a day of counting our blessings, giving thanks, and honoring the divinity in prayer. Typically, pagans see Mabon season as a time of Thanksgiving, but that doesn't mean we don't observe the traditional holiday as well, so I thought it would be appropriate to address pagan prayer and spirituality tonight with my guest, Marius Stormcrow. Now, he's a third-degree Reiki master healer and teacher, high priest of the Pectiwida tradition, a rune reader, and a magician. And he's studied the arcane arts, Nordic paganism, and shamanic practices for over 25 years and is considered an elder in the pagan community. Stormcrow also lectures on pagan prayer and spirituality, as well as male pagan spirituality. So, I am thankful that you're here with me tonight, and welcome.
Thank you, Marla. I'm thankful to be here, too.
It's a day to be thankful all around.
Yeah. It's Thanksgiving is a really interesting time because it is a time when we sit down and we are thankful for the things that we have in our lives, and we are, as you had said earlier, that Mabon is the traditional pagan Thanksgiving, where we celebrate, the beginning of the reaping of the harvests, the fruits and the vegetables that we bring in from our gardens and our fields. But in today's modern urban society, I think Thanksgiving really is a time that is, for all people, replace that as a time that we're thankful for our friends and our family, for the successes that we have through the year, and for just basically sharing goodwill as Americans, because people, need to realize that Thanksgiving, as a holiday that we see it on, the November and Thursday and November, is a strictly American observance. Mm-hmm. An American holiday.
The funny thing was, I was thinking about tonight's topic, and I kind of chuckled to myself at one point because there are still some people who can't imagine that pagans are the least bit spiritual or do any type of prayer, because in their minds, we're heathens, and we're supposedly, we don't believe in God as they know him, and therefore we have no souls. And I remembered that one very well-meaning Christian was genuinely worried about me going to hell because of my belief system, and that made no sense to me at all, because if I have no soul, how the heck could I spend an eternity in hell?
Right.
So let's start out talking about spirituality.
Sure. Well, what people need to understand is, I think, is even what pagan or heathen means. And I think that's a big misunderstanding of what a heathen is. Because a heathen really means, in translation, is people of the hearth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And a pagan is a person of the field. Right. So there's really no, connotation of not having a soul or being godless. In fact, if we look at the prehistory in the world, we realize that, these people were very spiritual people, that spirituality did not just occur on a Sunday, that spirituality was a 365, depending on your calendar, day of the year event, that you lived your spirituality, that your gods and your goddesses, people that were pagan or heathens, were an intricate part of their daily lives. And the thankfulness or the fear that what they would do to their gods and goddesses if they had angered them, or the joy or the bliss that they would receive, or the bountiful harvest or the healthy children if they had made them happy. So really, it's kind of the opposite of what the general idea of what a pagan or a heathen is. They're very spiritual. We are very spiritual people. We have to be, because in pagan spirituality and heathen spirituality, you are directly involved in the day-to-day with your deities. it's not something that we do on a Sunday. It's not something we only do 8 days, celebrations, or a few more, depending on which group or what subheading of pagan you fall under. But this is something that pagans and witches and Wiccans and Druids and Asatru and the whole combination of the pagan community do on a day-to-day basis. I know my one teacher, Kenna Grayspirit, who's a very wonderful woman, one of the first things she does when you start in learning, witchcraft by her is that, what are your daily affirmations? And a lot of people look at her, what do you mean daily affirmations? Well, what do you do on a day-to-day basis to show that you're thankful? What do you do to recognize the deity in your life on a day-to-day basis? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, they kind of neglect that. And that's a really, really important part, because how do you really embrace a deity unless you know that deity? And how do you know deity unless you talk to your deity? How do we know anybody? When you go up and you have a stranger, or you go up and you meet somebody, the first thing you do is you meet, you introduce yourself. That's kind of in the pagan spirituality, your initiation. When you're learning to be initiated into the pagan community, if you belong to a group, or even if you're a solitary practitioner, what you're doing is that you're introducing yourself to your patron deities. You're introducing yourself to your gods and your goddesses. Hi, I'm Marius Stormcrow. My patron is Odin and Freya. And I say, I'm here to be with you. I am here to try to emulate what you do. I'm here to I'm not going to say copy, but use your ways as an example on how I wish to live my life or how I wish to be. So that's one of the, to me, a very important thing is we have to get to know our deities. We have to get to embrace them. And one of the ways, the surest ways to do that is conversation. And what really, Marla, is prayer but conversation with deity?
Mm-hmm. Now, people are going to sit there. Some people are going to say, well, how do I know who my deity is? How do I pick one? What resonates to me? Where do I find them? What do you tell people about that?
Well, what I do is I tell them it's an internal search. And deity calls to you. The problem with modern society really is that we don't take the time anymore to listen. Deity calls you on I'm going to sound hokey, but it calls you on the lisping of the wind. Mm-hmm. The water. When you hear the brook. When we take time and we listen, or even in silence, when we listen to our own inner voice. Mm-hmm. That's how deity talks to us. And deity always answers. I've never had a time in my life when I've sat back and said, why have my gods forsaken me? Because you got to learn to take the time to listen. And that's part of pagan spirituality, is that interconnectedness with nature, and that interconnectedness with each other, and that interconnectedness with the universe. Because you know what? We really are, in a spiritual sense, all connected. We are all spiritual beings on a human journey here on this planet. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things. We need to take the time to understand that connectedness at all levels, whether it be nature or spiritual, universal. And that's how we draw that in. That's how deity connects to us as we connect to deity. And we connect to deity by being patient, by listening, by slowing down a little bit. We always hear the phrase, we need to slow down and smell the flowers. Ancient man had all the time in the world to do that. Hunting and gathering man had more leisure time and more time to reflect and more time to wonder and ponder than we do now. With all with our weekends off and our 9-to-5 work schedule, but modern man has become a hectic, crazy thing. We're always running around. We're always trying to make the buck. We're always wondering where the rent's coming from. We're always trying to figure out, pay the bills. Did we make this person happy? Are we making the boss happy? Are we doing this? And pagan man or pre-modern man was calm. They knew they had their hardships, and there were hardships. There was wild animals, there was, the fear of starvation, there was the fear of that. But then they understood that was part of the cycles of life. And part of being a pagan is the wheel, right? The wheel of the year, which is really a reflection of our own lives. In spring, our mothers are pregnant with us as, in bulk, as things continue on. We're born. As we hit Mabon, we're coming into the golden years of our lives. By the time we hit Samhain and Yule, our lives are passing on, and we're moving on into the realms of our ancestors. So, as a pagan, one of the things we need to understand is that our lives reflect the natural cycle of things. And we see that through deity. And we try to live it through deity, or we try to maybe understand it better through deity. And like I said, when it comes down to prayer, and the best way to understand what deity we are trying to get, or what is trying to reach us, or what stirs within us. I mean, I believe there's a lot of factors. Your ethnicity, what connects to you. If you're an Italian, you may be closer to the Roman gods or the Elysian mysteries. If you are, Germanic or Scandinavian or Rus, the heathen gods may have come to you. If you're from northern Spain, France, and England, or Great Britain, the Celtic spirits may move to you, or the animistic religions in Japan. If you are of Japanese, the Shinto faith. So deity talks to us in a lot of different ways. So a lot of different things. What resonates within you, or even what experiences have you gotten through deity? So, and I believe that deity reaches us individually. I can't sit there and go, by your aura, you are a Kronos girl. Because I don't know what's inside of you. You know what's inside of you. And it's a self-exploration. One of the things that happens when you are in a witchcraft or a pagan coven is that's one of the things you do. You go through your degrees. And the first degree is you're to be initiated into the mysteries of the craft. And one of the important things is that, I was taught was, what's your deity? That was the major focus. What was your deity? What's your connection? Why do you have this connection? Why do you think this deity is calling you? And that was another very important thing, because then we look at it from the perspective of, when we pray to that deity, do they respond? Do they know you? Do they want to know you? Because that deity, what you think you may have, may not be the deity for you. Exactly. And what little clues, right. Go ahead, Mom. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, you're absolutely right. And, the way I look at it is that in any religion, I always say that who we pray to and which higher being or beings we believe in isn't as important as the belief in a higher being, period. But how does pagan spirituality, in your opinion, differ from other secular ways? Or does it? Maybe it doesn't.
Well, there are some things in common. And, there's one of the commonalities is a belief in an afterlife. If you go across the spectrum, whether you're Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, pagan, heathen, across the panacea, there is a belief in the afterlife. There is a belief in the continuation of some form of the soul after we're done here. I think some of the big differences are what occurs after. As a pagan, I do follow a strong Nordic tradition. I was a soldier in the U.S. military when I was younger. And some of the things that I've done in my life, I believe that when I die, I may go to Odin's Hall, to Valhalla, because of what I have done in my life. If if you are of one of the Wiccans, Alexander Gardnerian, you may believe you're going to move on to the Summerland, where you regenerate and get ready to go, whether or not you're ready to move on to your next incarnation or come back. If you're a Buddhist, you're coming back. If you're a Hindu, you're coming back, and maybe the same, maybe different, depending on how you lived your life. So I think that's where most of the religions differ, is what happens after you pass. The other thing is, too, what I find in most pagan spirituality is that we never profess to be absolutely sure. Because we really, as a pagan, as an umbrella, there is no one higher doctrine. We don't have the book. There is not the book of Pagan, where this is what's going to happen, because it's an amalgamation of faith that came, way before the book. So that's another thing, that we see with pagans. I mean, if you look at what's a witch, what faith does a witch follow? Okay, and really, what is a witch? There's another one. What is a witch? I mean, you have eclectic, Celtic, Nordic. The list goes on. Pectiwida. You have Gardnerian, Alexandrian. You have, the Frost tradition. You have CX Wicca. You have, the list is as long as your arm. You have Reconstructionists, Druids, Asatru. Some people would say certain British traditional order witchcraft falls under Reconstructionist. You have the Druids themselves, whether they're ADF or OBD, or Androxian, or Order of Bards, Ovate Bards and Druids. So there's a whole plethora, and each person has their own belief. I think one of the big compliments to people of the pagan faith is, I don't tell you you're wrong.
Right.
And that's a big, for me, that's huge in spirituality. I don't profess that I know everything. I don't profess that, as a pagan, my way is the absolute right way. As a pagan, I have an idea. I have a kind of an understanding of what's out there. I have, I understand that there's a polarity in the universe. There's a masculine and a feminine, a light and a dark. I don't recognize an ultimate evil. I don't recognize an ultimate good. I recognize that there's a balance in the universe. And for my life to live properly, I have to be in balance.
Well, exactly. Sorry, but before I forget it, because this is kind of germane to what you're saying, I read a quote on the subject of pagan spirituality, which explained that paganism in its many forms acknowledges a divine presence within nature, and this presence can be masculine or feminine, benevolent or destructive. So you have the two together, always, the yin and the yang.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a blend of things that go into pagan spirituality. We look at it as a universe. I mean, we are a small part of a greater whole. We are not the end-all and be-all of the universe. We are a small part of that greater whole, but we are still part of that whole. And that is the one thing that I think I've taken out of pagan spirituality, is that I am part of the universe, that I am a significant, living, breathing entity, and that I have value and worth. And that because of that, my life is, I'm trying to put this in a better way, I think. I think what it is that we as pagans are really part of a greater whole. We recognize our role in the universe, and we recognize our roles to each other and in the cycles of nature. We don't try to separate ourselves from it, I think is what I'm trying to say. We're not outside of the natural thing. We're not outside of heaven. We're not outside of the universe. We are all part of the process. We are part of the universe. We are part of the cycles of nature. And we show that just by the way we live. We are born, we live, we pass, just like the cycles of nature. You know, spring comes, we're born. I guess to carry what I said earlier. And spring comes, we're born. We live through our cycle, and then we pass on. One of the things I think we believe is that then we become further on into the cycle. I really don't, you know, I don't really want to narrow it down. I want to try to keep things in kind of a broad, in a broad generalization. I really believe that we move forward, that we go on, that we continue on with our lives, that our spirits leave this human journey and we enter on to our next journey, where we learn. There's a famous quote by the poet Rumi, and when they asked him if he was afraid of death, and Rumi said, well, when I died as a rock, I became a flower. When I died as a flower, I became an animal. When I, you know, died as an animal, I became a man. I've had no fear of dying. Why would I have fear of this? When I die as a man, I'll become a beautiful angel. And when I die as an angel, I will become something that I cannot fathom. Mm-hmm. So in my belief, I really, you know, I think a lot of pagans have this belief that we continue on. Our journey continues on. It moves forward. We don't stop. We don't stop learning. We don't stop growing. We continue on to our spiritual journeys. Is there an end? I don't know. Nobody's ever come back and said, hey, you know, there's a destination. I've always been taught it's the journey even in this lifetime. Mm-hmm. It's a journey to greater spirituality. It's a journey to become a greater spiritual being, to learn, to understand my role within the universe, and to try to be a completed spirit, a knowledgeable spirit. I believe in ancestors. I believe that the ancestors do come and are part of our lives, and these are spirits that, you know, in Reiki, you can call them ascended masters, or ones that have gone on before that have opted to help our lives and through guidance and wisdom. And once again, I think just like we can with deity, that our ancestors are there to guide us and help us, but we have to connect to them. We have to acknowledge their existence and recognize that they do have a role in our lives. In the Nordic paganism especially, ancestors hold a very, very strong role because we believe they are with us and that they do guide us and that they're there to help us in our times of trouble and our times and they're there to celebrate our joy. And I think that's another thing. You know, we talk a lot about spirituality, but how do we express our spirituality? We express our spirituality as a pagan through ritual, but we also do it through prayer. You had said earlier that you believe, you know, that a lot of people go, well, you're a pagan, you don't pray. You know, you don't have a soul, you don't have. I think as a pagan, we spend a lot of our time praying. We do it when we do a ritual. We do it when we do, if you are of a religious persuasion, as a witch, you pray when you do a ritual. You can do, if you do magic without the religious background, you're a magician. Mm-hmm. When you add a spiritual element to it, that's when you become a witch. That's when you're a Wiccan or a pagan. Anybody can pick up a book, open it up, and if you have belief that it'll work, you can cast a spell. Mm-hmm.
And I always say people cast spells all the time. They don't realize.
Yes, they do. Simple, rain, go away, come back another day. You know, one of the spells that we learn as a child.
Mm-hmm. Or even somebody that cuts you off in traffic and you're like, damn you, you know, boom, you just put a curse on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's interesting.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to go to, I just, sorry to interrupt, but, you know, you're talking about growth and development and this and that. I think I already know the answer to this, but is there a set guideline, or is our spiritual growth personal to each of us as far as we develop? do we have a choice of developing more? Do we, something in our DNA and our system says, okay, well, this lifetime around you can only do this much.
Right.
So do we have a choice? Can we just soak up wisdom like a sponge, or just know that we've reached a certain point that we need to stop?
Absolutely. You know what, Marla? That is a great question, because there is no limit to it. Mm-hmm. The only limit that we have are the limits we put on ourselves. Mm-hmm. The only limit we have is the limits that we put on ourselves. We are beings of pure potentiality. Mm-hmm. We can go as far as we want to go. We are bound by our own set of limitations that we create or have been created for us by life experiences. So when we look at our lives and we go, well, I really want to learn. I really want to do this. Well, what's keeping us from doing it? What's keeping us from being kinder or gentler? What's keeping us from looking up at the stars? Here's a great exercise that I give when I do a seminar. It's a wonderful exercise, and especially if it's a beautiful starry night. Mm-hmm. You go outside and you look up at the sky, the night sky. And if you're lucky to live in a more rural area or an area that doesn't have a lot of city light where you can really see the stars, mm-hmm. and you look up, and everyone's initial reaction when we have discussion is, I feel so small. I feel so insignificant. I'm so small. I'm tiny. This is a whole big universe. But then I go, well, go back out again. We're going to do this again. And this time, when you start to feel small and insignificant, don't look down. Keep looking up. Mm-hmm. So they can, so we bring them on again, and they're looking up at the night sky, and they're looking, and you can tell that they want to put their heads down because they're told that they're small. They're being taught. We're taught right from a very young age that we're small. And then I go, keep looking. Don't look down. Keep looking up. And then the one, it starts. You start to see the glimmer in some of their eyes. And you start to see them get taller. And this is everybody who does this experiment. I really, the listeners at home, if you get a chance to do this, this is a wonderful, wonderful exercise, is to get out there and you look up, and what happens is you don't feel small anymore. But what happens is you let that spirit go. You broke that barrier. You don't feel small and insignificant anymore. You're looking up, and you start to feel connected. And you start to feel part of it. And when you start to feel part of something, you take value in it. It becomes part of you. And it's a wonderful exercise. It is. It's an amazing exercise that really opens up your spiritual being. Because that's what we're small. We can't do this. We're always told what you can do, what you can't do. Don't step on the lawn. Don't make a right on red. Don't do this. We are in a society in lives that are filled with rules and regulations and things like that keep us small. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we need to do is learn that we're not small. That each person, that each individual, regardless of what race you are, regardless of what religion you are, regardless of how much money you make, it's regardless of all of the factors and all the limitations that we put on ourselves, that we are on the inside spiritual beings. Mm-hmm. And that once we shed the outside, that that you drive a 1962 Ford Pinto and you live in a you live in a small bungalow that you rent, or you live in a mansion and drive a Rolls Royce, it really doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Because if you're content in your own spirituality, if you're content with whom you are, not what you are, mm-hmm. then you start to develop a spirituality. Then you start to develop, once again, who you are. And then what happens is you become limitless.
Mm-hmm.
Your spirit opens up. And that's really what, in my opinion, what paganism really is. It's the ability to not be held by those societal withholdings. There are rules. Of course there are rules, because that's what keeps things in somewhat order. We don't want, obviously, let's look at the Wiccan Reed for an example. Somebody asked me one time, who do you think has the strongest moral code to live by? And I said, well, it's the pagans, it's the Wiccans. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, and though it harm none, do as thou will. I go, that's a very powerful statement. I'm not giving 10 restrictions.
So is abide within the law ye must.
Right.
That'll start you out knowing where you're going with it.
Right. And so with that, that's what we're told. As a pagan, I go, I'm limitless. I can do whatever I want. I can explore my spirituality and let it take me anywhere I wish to go, as long as it doesn't cause harm. And that's a big phrase, because causing harm means to me as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
If I take from somebody, I've harmed them. If I want to hurt myself through drugs or, illegal drugs or things like that, I'm harming myself.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm, definitely a topic for another show, but that's one of the things. So as our limitations are stripped away, our self-imposed limitations, limitations that are presented to us through how we walk or things like that, then we can start to realize that we're spiritual beings, that we're good beings, and that we have the potential and the capabilities of really doing great things. And with that, that's when we start making true connection to deity, because deity wants us to move forward. Deity wants us to progress.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it didn't, why would it show itself? And if it's a deity, and I would have to admit there are some deities out there that don't. There are negative aspects out there in the universe, of course. We live in a universe of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to understand that, hey, bad things do happen. Good things also happen. So it's living life in the balance, in the cycle, and understanding that, like I said, that to be happy and proud that we are part of that cycle of life, to be part of that cycle of nature, and to be part of the cycle of the universe. And that's kind of, I guess that's all I got to say on that.
All right, let me jump to something else, because earlier I talked about you teaching about male pagan spirituality. Now,
Yeah.
How different from pagan spirituality is it in general?
It's not much. I think one of the situations that have occurred in the modern witchcraft movement is, in a lot of cases, it's become very goddess-centric.
Mm-hmm.
And in that hand, it's, when I look at it, it's not much different than any other monotheism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it has. Well, let's break this down. You have a goddess who is reigning over the universe and the earth and nature and all the cycles, and you have her male consort. Let's flip this into the Abrahamic phase. You have a male deity who is a creator in charge of all the universe, and he has a female consort, Mary, if you're a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? It's replacing a male supreme being with a female supreme being.
Mm-hmm.
Paganism is really about balance.
Right.
When we talk about male pagan spirituality, it's understanding what that role is within paganism.
Mm-hmm.
We see that too in a lot of the Nordic pagans, where it's very Odinic, very Odin central.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, doesn't Odin have an equal? And people, a lot of guys, well, no. I go, he doesn't. Apparently, read the Havamal, because Frigga kind of keeps Odin in check.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's Frigga that tells Odin nothing. He's begging her, honey, please tell me what's going on. So I know what's going on. And Frigga goes, no, you don't get to know.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find it out. And that sets Odin off on his quest for wisdom and knowledge, where he gives up his eye. So there is a balance there. There is a husband and wife team. Frigga is considered the queen of Asgard. She is the motherly role. She has equal footing. When Odin is off on his journeys, who sits on the throne? Frigga. So there is a balance.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times what happens is males in paganism kind of lose the maleness in the paganism. And one of the things that I try to teach them is, there is, it's a balance. Just as if you need to find the feminine half. It's a dual-edged sword. You need to start looking at the feminine half. Because in Celtic paganism, Cernunnos is what nurtures nature.
Mm-hmm.
It's the cycles, the Holly King, the Oak King.
Right.
Okay? Well, that's a nurturing role.
It is.
So you have to, and we have always, because of modern thinking, applied the nurturer role to the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of cases, the nurturing role can be masculine.
Mm-hmm.
So when we see that, especially in the natural cycles of things. So, we do have a mother role in the goddess. We have a father role in the god, the light half, the dark half. So a lot of times what happens in modern witchcraft is that the male aspect has been kind of downplayed. What I've always found too is in a lot of modern witchcraft is that a lot of people get involved in it not because they're kind of moved to it, but as a rebellion to the faith of their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Or because it's very female. Wicca is female orientated, and a lot of you see that, and then you try to explain to them, well, it's not. It's a duality. So when we talk about male pagan spirituality, what we're talking about is understanding the duality in it, understanding that there is an equality, and that's what makes paganism so wonderful, in my opinion. Is that there is a duality. There is not an oppressive father figure that is going to punish you for eating, a roast beef sandwich on a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
What there is that there's a father figure and a mother figure, and that together they make up the cycles of nature. They make up the order of the universe, and that we are part of that. So inside of every male, there's a bit of feminine. There's that nurturing role. But inside of every female, there's that masculine.
Mm-hmm.
There's that warrior aspect. So there's it's getting anyone to really understand. I don't want to say it's a misnomer on male pagan spirituality. It's getting to understand that, males have a role in paganism. Even through history.
Right.
Even not to bring up a negative connotation, but during the witch persecutions, in countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, the majority of the people that were accused and executed for witchcraft were men.
Mm-hmm.
So, males have a very strong and positive role in paganism and in witchcraft especially. It's getting, I think, men to understand that they do have an equal footing. The coven that I come from, with Ken of Graceberry, there was an equality. Well, there was a male high priest and there was a female high priestess when she found somebody that would take on the role. And then, the wild, the interesting thing was when we started our group, it went male to female. So the male high priest was the person who handled the day-to-day doldrums of, making sure, was the budget kept and, did the, what we call the physical plant of things, made sure there was enough paper cups for cakes and ale, and to make sure that the ale was brought, and who was in charge of bringing this for that. That role was taken on by a male. But when that male stepped down, the person to take on that role next was a female.
Uh-huh.
And it went, down the line.
Right.
To touch on, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
To touch on some of the prayer issue. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I know, being that it is Thanksgiving time, and I would really like to touch on, is the point of pagan prayer. Because to me, that's really how we do connect with deity and how we make the connections with deity and ourselves. Mm-hmm. So, just like to do kind of an exercise here at Thanksgiving, if you don't mind.
Great.
What I would like to do is, everybody that's in the listening audience, while they're listening, is to just close their eyes. And what we're going to do is we're going to think of all the people that are here, and if they're within earshot of the internet, and they can hear the computer, and they're around, and they're interested in listening to the show, what I want them to do is anybody that's around listening is to hold hands with the people that are there with them. Okay, so that they're a grouping there. And what we're going to do is I want those people to think of all the ancestors that they have and invite them in right now, too. So we're going to invite all of our ancestors, everybody that we cared about, our friends, our family, even our pets, and everybody that's there around that is listening to the show, and they're going to hold hands, and I want them to all hold hands with their ancestors. Now, what we're going to do is I'm not going to put a name of a deity in there, but we're going to use spirit, because spirit's just a wonderful way of expressing deity when we have a group of people or we just don't know. Spirit is always a wonderful thing. So we're going to now, in our own minds, think of 3 things that we are thankful for. Okay? So 3 of the things that we are all absolutely thankful for. And with all of our friends and all of our family and all of our ancestors, okay, we're going to be thankful to deity and say thank you. So we're going to say thank you, deity, thank you, spirit, thank you, goddess, thank you, God, thank you, Mother, Father, God, for bringing this all together on today to show thanks and to celebrate with joy. May those who are out and suffering loneliness find friendship and comfort. May those who have nothing gain something. May those get what they need. May those that are suffering find comfort, especially on today. Because we are thankful for all that we have. Okay? And we're going to end traditionally pagan, so mote it be. So we're all going to say together, right? So mote it be. So now, this is one of the big important things with prayer, especially in paganism. We believe in the threefold law, which means that everything we do, positive and negative, is amplified 3 times 3 times 3. Everything. So if we do something wicked, we know that it's going to come back to us times 3. If we do something positive, we know it's going to come back to us times 3. One of the problems that we experience in prayer, Marla, is that we only usually pray when we need something. We only usually pray when we find ourselves in times of crisis, when we find ourselves in times of sorrow and suffering. And those are really, really good times to pray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what about when we're joyful? Because if we're joyful and we send out energy into the universe, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that energy comes back to us threefold.
Right.
But if we're praying and it's going out to the universe, and we're praying for joy, and we're sending that joy back, that means we're giving everybody in the universe a little bit of our joy.
Mm-hmm.
So now, with a little bit of joy, that person may pray. And if they're thankful and joyful, that goes out into the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And that multiplies 3 times 3 times 3.
Right.
Okay? Which gives everybody a little bit of that joy too. And if we are joyful in the universe, and I really believe that we can affect change, because what is real magic, Marla? Let's take this to is through will changing the universe, changing an outcome or getting a result through actions of will is what a spell is, right? So when we light a candle for prosperity or healing, we are setting up a situation to send out energy, focused energy, into the universe for that energy to come back, okay, from deity or spirit or Mother, Father, God, or however we want to put it, to affect the change that we wish to see. Okay? So if we do this when we're thankful, when we do this when we're happy, and we do this when we're joyful, that same energy goes out into the universe and comes back.
Exactly.
And what happens then is we create a more happy, joyful universe.
Mm-hmm. And I think whether a person is pagan or not, it's all about dedication. And I think you touched on this too, that one of the most important things is that it's not just about helping ourselves, the spirituality, the prayers, but in expanding our concept of our role in the universe, in our religion, and determining our meaning to them. And in turn, it's helping others as well, which is pretty much just what you said. So it's not an egotistical based method. It just works.
Right. And Mara, that's a very good point, because, we as modern people, and I'm using that term because really when we look at what paganism is or heathenism is or any of the old faiths, it's really what it is. It's an old faith. This isn't nothing new. Witchcraft isn't new. The Gardnerian style of witchcraft came out, I think it was 1954, when it was brought to the public. But he was taught by Dorothy Clutterbuck, who was taught by somebody else, who was taught by, the new Forest Witches. And it went on and on and on and on and on. So paganism and witchcraft has been around for a millennium. It's been around since the dawn of man, when he woke up for the first time, looked up at the stars and went, there's something more. What is it? What is out there? And I think that's one of the things that we as people have a hard time connecting to. And I think the reason why we have a hard time connecting to is just because of the busyness of our lives. And that's one of the important things, is, like I said, is that reconnection to nature. It's the reconnection to the cycle, and the understanding that we are a significant part of the universe. A small part, yet very significant. Because what we do, what any conscious being does, it sends out that energy. We are all connected on that interconnected web. And if we send out positive energy and energies of feelings of kindness and love and gentleness into the universe, and that touches other beings, then that energy comes back. And if we believe that it comes back in 3 times 3 times 3, then it comes back stronger. And if we send it out stronger, it comes back that way. So, I mean, I'm not, and believe me, by no stretch of the imagination do I want to reduce this to a fluffy bunny feel-good kind of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Part of being a pagan, too, and part of our spirituality is understanding there is a dark half.
Mm-hmm.
Is understanding that things happen, understanding that there is negativity, that people do pass on, that there is loss in our lives, that there is a balance of positive and negative, of light and dark. The other part of that is being personally responsible, is taking responsibility for the positive and negative in our lives. And to me, that is a very positive pagan trait. At no point do I ever hear the gods did this to me. That was one of the things I've never heard a pagan say. This is the god's fault. Why does the god hate me that way? Or why does by the goddess? Why did she make me suffer? You never hear that. Paganism is really a faith, and our spirituality is our personal responsibility.
Right.
I was at a shop not too long ago, and a young woman came in, and she had an issue, and she needed some spell work done. And she went to the owner of the shop, a very lovely woman, and she said, well, who do I pray to for this? Well, who do you pray to? And the woman looked at her and said, well, you don't want to pray to who I pray to. They don't know you. Pray to who do you pray to? All it is a prayer. Mm-hmm. And the woman kind of was taken aback, like, well, I pray to this deity. And she said, that'll do just fine. So that's to me, that was a very important lesson. We get these little lessons, and that's how I say how the gods talk to us this way. And it was like, you're right. We have to, that's part of that interconnection with deity. And why I believe that prayer is an important part of that is understanding and opening up that spirituality, is opening up a conversation with deity, is opening up the discussion and opening up ourselves to the guidance and opening up ourselves to the understanding that it's out there and we're out there, and deity is basically a reflection of who we wish to be.
All right, so you were talking about lessons learned, and I think the one for tonight is time is not on our side. Because an hour runs by very, very quickly. So before we go, where can people find out more about you or your lectures or any of that good stuff?
I can be reached at Marius Stormcrow, all at one word, at gmail.com. And I do occasionally post out when we're doing things. So just, I'm also through Facebook, and that's pretty much it.
Well,
I'm both operating in the local area, so.
I really appreciate you coming on tonight. It's Thanksgiving, and again, what a great idea about spirituality and prayer, and thank you for the blessing that we put out there to everybody, because that was a nice surprise and a very important one, too. So, again, thank you for everything. Have a blessed rest of the year and a great new year. And everybody out there, thank you for listening. And until next time, everyone, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2013. Moonlight Hall by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.